I was on the verge of death in the hospital, and my wife showed no concern. "I'm not your caretaker. Deal with it yourself," she told me. I simply nodded and remained quiet. As soon as I was released, I gathered my things and walked away. She laughed, thinking she had the upper hand. 2 years later, she was flooding my phone with messages, pleading for another opportunity. I lay there in the hospital bed, the beeping of the machines a constant reminder of my fragile state. My chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of an invisible force, each breath a battle. The room was stark, the white walls reflecting, the harsh fluorescent light making everything seem even more clinical, more detached. Emily was there, but not really. Her eyes were glued to her phone, the blue light casting shadows on her face, making her look almost spectral. I tried to speak, to call out to her, but my voice was a mere whisper, lost in the symphony of medical equipment. When I coughed, the sound was harsh, a desperate plea for air. Emily's reaction was a fleeting glance, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. "I'm not your caretaker, deal with it yourself." The coldness in her voice was chilling, more so than the antiseptic air of the hospital room. I felt a surge of emotions, a mix of anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loneliness. Here I was, fighting for each breath, and the woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, was more concerned with her emails than with my struggle. My mind raced, thoughts swirling like the dust in a storm. Should I confront her? Should I let her go, except that perhaps our paths had diverged too far? The pain in my chest wasn't just from my condition. It was the pain of realization, of seeing the truth laid bare in the sterile light of this hospital room, but I reached out, my hand trembling, not just from weakness, but from the weight of my decision. I wanted to touch her, to feel some connection, but my hand fell back onto the cold sheets, my resolve hardening. The decision was made, not by words, but by the silent acknowledgement of our disconnect. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned to our home, a modern, sleek house that felt more like a showcase than a home. Emily was out, likely at another property showing or networking event. I packed my bags with a heavy heart, not just from the physical strain, but from the emotional toll of our deteriorating relationship. As I walked out, Emily returned, her laughter echoing through the hallway as she saw me with my suitcase. "Leaving? Good luck, Jake." "You'll be back," she said with a smirk, confident in her control over our relationship. I moved into a modest apartment on the other side of town, a place where I could breathe, both literally and metaphorically. The solitude was initially overwhelming, but it also brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I focused on my health, therapy, and work, slowly rebuilding my life. The apartment was small, but it was mine, filled with the quiet I needed to heal. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. My health improved. My therapy sessions became less about survival and more about thriving. I found solace in routine, in the mundane tasks of daily life that I had once taken for granted. Cooking simple meals, reading books I'd always meant to get to, and even starting to jog again, albeit slowly. Emily's words echoed in my mind sometimes, especially late at night when the city quieted down. "You'll be back," she had said with such certainty. But as time passed, her voice grew fainter, less convincing. I realized that my return was no longer an option. 2 years had passed since I left Emily and our life together. I had settled into a new routine, my health significantly improved with proper care and less stress. One evening, while working late, my phone buzzed incessantly. It was Emily. Her voice was desperate, pleading. "Jake, please, can we talk? I need you." I hesitated, the memories of our last encounter still fresh in my mind. But there was something in her tone, a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. I agreed to meet her, curiosity mixed with a lingering sense of responsibility. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind where the coffee is strong and the conversations are hushed. Emily looked different. Her usual vibrancy was dimmed, her eyes shadowed with worry. She told me about her diagnosis, a respiratory condition eerily similar to mine. Her world, once so vibrant and fast-paced, had slowed down, mirroring the life she once dismissed. She was now facing the same struggles I had, alone. Hearing her story, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was a part of me that wanted to say, "I told you so." But another part, the part that still cared, ached for her. I remembered the isolation, the fear, the struggle to breathe, and I couldn't help but empathize. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't understand what you were going through. I was so caught up in my own world, my own ambitions." I took a sip of my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. "Emily, it's not about understanding now. It's about what you do with this understanding." She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "I need your help, Jake. I'm scared, and I don't know how to handle this alone." I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not the confident real estate mogul, but a woman facing her mortality. "I can help you, Emily, but not like before. Not as your partner, but as someone who's been there." We talked for hours, about her treatments, her fears, and the changes she needed to make. I shared my experiences, the therapies that worked. I sat across from Emily, the cafe's dim lighting casting long shadows over our table. The air was thick with the scent of roasted coffee beans, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital air I once knew. Emily's eyes, once bright with ambition, now held a depth of sorrow and fear. "I was wrong, Jake," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I watched her, the woman who had once dismissed my struggles with a cold detachment, now seeking solace in the very person she had pushed away. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here she was, thinner, her eyes lacking the spark I remembered, speaking of her regrets, how she missed our life together, how she now understood the loneliness and fear I felt during my illness. I didn't realize how hard it was until now, she continued, tears welling up. I was so focused on my career, on being the best, that I forgot what was truly important. Her confession stirred a mix of emotions within me. Sympathy for her current plight, yes, but also a lingering resentment. I remembered the nights alone in that hospital room, the fear of each breath, the isolation, and her dismissive words, "I'm not your caretaker, deal with it yourself." Yet, seeing her now, so vulnerable, I couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy. Her world had turned, and she was now facing the same battles I had fought. "Emily," I started, my voice steady, "I can help you, but not as your partner. That part of our life is over." I paused, letting the gravity of my words sink in. "I can be your friend, someone who understands what you're going through." She nodded, her hand reaching out to mine, trembling slightly. I didn't pull away, but I didn't return the gesture either. "I need to know I'm not alone in this," she said, her voice breaking. I took another sip of my coffee, the bitterness a reminder of the past. "You're not alone, Emily. But you need to understand, this isn't just about you anymore. It's about both of us finding our own paths, even if they run parallel for a while." Emily's eyes searched mine, looking for a sign of the love that once was, but all she found was a calm resolve. "I understand," she whispered, her voice tinged with both acceptance and a hint of relief. I just want to feel like I'm not alone in this." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You won't be alone, Emily. I'll be there for you. But we need boundaries. We need to respect where we are now, not where we were." She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging slightly as if a burden had been lifted, yet the weight of her condition still pressed down. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice steadier now. "I appreciate that more than you know." We spent the rest of the evening discussing practicalities. I offered to help her find a good therapist, someone who could guide her through the emotional turmoil of her diagnosis. We talked about her medical appointments, the treatments she was considering, and how she could manage her work around her health needs. As the cafe began to empty, the barista started cleaning up, signaling it was time to leave. Emily stood up, her movements slower, more deliberate than I remembered. I'll call you, she said, a small, hopeful smile playing on her lips. Call anytime, I replied, standing as well. I mean it, Emily. Anytime. We walked out into the cool night air, the city lights casting a soft glow around us. Emily paused at the curb, turning to face me. Jake, I know I've said this before, but I am truly sorry for how I was when you needed me. I was blind to your pain, and I regret that every day. I looked at her, the sincerity in her eyes undeniable. I know, Emily, and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to how things were. It means we move forward differently. She nodded, her expression one of solemn understanding. I'll take what I can get. Emily accepted my offer of friendship. Understanding that our paths had diverged too far to converge again, we started meeting, regularly, not as lovers, but as two people who had shared a significant part of their lives. She began to adapt to her new reality, finding solace in the support of friends and family, much like I had. As for me, I continued to thrive in my independence, occasionally reflecting on how close I came to losing myself in a relationship that was more about control than love. Emily's calls stopped being about begging for another chance. Instead, they became updates on her health, her new projects, and sometimes just to talk. One evening, as I stood by the window of my apartment, the city lights twinkling below, I felt a profound sense of freedom and self-reliance. Emily had taught me a hard lesson, but in the end, it was a lesson that set me free. The future for Jake and Emily? It was uncertain, yet there was a clarity in our separation. We had both grown, albeit in different directions. Emily was learning to navigate her life with her new health challenges, and I was embracing a life where my well-being was my priority. Our meetings became less frequent, but they were filled with a newfound respect for each other's journeys. Emily shared stories of her therapy sessions, how she was learning to manage her stress, and how she was slowly stepping back from the relentless pace of her career to focus on her health. I, on the other hand, found myself diving deeper into my work, not just for the sake of success, but for the joy it brought me. I started mentoring young professionals, sharing insights not just on business but on life, on the importance of balance and self-care. In one of our last meetings, Emily looked at me with a soft smile, her eyes reflecting a peace I hadn't seen before. Jake, I'm grateful for our time together, for your understanding and for showing me what really matters in life, she said, her voice carrying a weight of sincerity. I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest. And I'm grateful for the lessons we've both learned, Emily. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.